thought the last day of high school would be about freedom. Seniors running wild, teachers pretending not to see, everybody signing yearbooks and making promises they'd never keep. But for me, the last day of school became something I'll never forget, and not for any of those reasons. It started out like every other end-of-year day. The air was thick with excitement, the halls buzzing with rumors about the senior prank. Our class had decided to go big, sneak into the old science wing after lunch and set up a mannequin in one of the abandoned labs. The science wing had been closed for years, ever since a fire in the chemistry lab. People said it was haunted, but I never believed in any of that stuff. It was just a creepy, empty part of the school, and perfect for a prank. I was the lookout. My friends, Jamie, Chris, and Tasha, were the ones carrying the mannequin, a weird plastic thing we'd found in the theater department. My job was to stand by the door and let them know if anyone was coming. We waited until the halls were empty, then slipped through the side door, hearts pounding with excitement. The science wing was even creepier than I remembered. The lights flickered overhead, and the air smelled like burnt plastic and dust. Our footsteps echoed as we crept down the hallway, past classrooms with broken windows and scorched desks. At the end of the hall was Lab 3B, the room where the fire had started. Jamie nudged me. "You good?" he whispered. "Yeah," I lied, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Let's do this." They slipped inside, dragging the mannequin behind them. I stayed in the hall, leaning against the cold metal door. I could hear them laughing and joking inside, their voices muffled by the thick walls. I checked my phone, no signal, of course. Typical. I glanced down the hallway, half expecting to see a teacher or a janitor, but it was empty. Then out of nowhere, the door behind me slammed shut. The sound was so loud it made me jump. I spun around, heart racing, and tried the handle. It was locked. I banged on the door, calling out for my friends, but they didn't answer. I could still hear their voices inside, but they sounded strange, distorted, like they were underwater. Panic started to creep in. I tried my phone again, but there was still no signal. I looked through the small, wire-reinforced window in the door. The room was dark, except for the flickering light overhead. I could see the mannequin standing in the corner, its blank face staring at the wall. My friends were nowhere in sight. Suddenly, I heard a scraping sound from inside the room. It was slow and deliberate, like someone dragging something heavy across the floor. I pressed my face to the glass, trying to see what was happening. The mannequin was gone. I blinked, thinking maybe I just missed it, but the corner was empty. The scraping sound grew louder, closer. I could see shadows moving across the far wall, long and twisted. Then out of the darkness, a pale face appeared, pressed against the glass on the other side of the door. Its eyes were wide and unblinking, its mouth twisted into a silent scream. I stumbled back, my heart hammering in my chest. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I could still hear my friends' voices, but now they sounded terrified, screaming for help. The face disappeared from the window and the room went silent. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in fear. It felt like hours. Then suddenly the door clicked open. I nearly fell into the room as it swung wide. My friends were standing there, looking confused and a little annoyed. "Dude, where'd you go?" Jamie asked. "We've been waiting for you." I looked past them into the room. The mannequin was back in the corner, but its head was turned, facing the window. I swear it hadn't been like that before. I was locked out, I stammered. "Didn't you hear me banging on the door?" They shook their heads. "We didn't hear anything," Tasha said. "We were just setting up the mannequin. You must have wandered off." I wanted to argue, to tell them about the face in the window, the scraping sound, the way their voices had sounded so strange. But I could tell they wouldn't believe me. Maybe I wouldn't have believed it myself if it hadn't happened to me. We left the science wing as quickly as we could, our prank forgotten. The halls were still empty, the air heavy with silence. I kept glancing over my shoulder and half expecting to see that pale face following us. When we finally made it back to the main part of the school, everything seemed normal again. Kids laughing, teachers packing up, and the end-of-year chaos in full swing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, I had nightmares about the science wing, about being trapped in that hallway, unable to move, while something watched me from the shadows. I saw the mannequin's face, twisted and grinning, its eyes following me wherever I went. I never told my friends what happened. They wouldn't have believed me anyway. But I never went near the science wing again, not even when we came back for graduation. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear that scraping sound in my dreams, and I wake up with my heart racing, certain that something is watching me from the darkness. People say the last day of school is supposed to be the happiest day of your life. For me, it was the scariest. And I know deep down that whatever I saw in that locked room is still there, waiting for someone else to find it. But that's not even the whole story. For weeks after, I tried to convince myself it was just stress, or maybe a trick of the mind. But weird things started happening. I'd see flashes of movement in my peripheral vision, especially in places with glass or mirrors. Once I was in the bathroom at home brushing my teeth, and I caught a glimpse of something pale and twisted in the mirror behind me. When I spun around, there was nothing there. My heart would pound so hard I'd feel dizzy. At school, I started avoiding the science wing altogether, even though it meant taking the long way to class. My friends teased me about it, but I just laughed it off. I didn't want to admit how scared I was. But then Jamie started acting weird too. He stopped hanging out with us after school, and when I asked him what was up, he just shrugged and said he was tired. I saw him one day, staring at the locked door to the science wing, his face pale and drawn. One afternoon, a few days before graduation, I got a text from Jamie. "Can you meet me at school? Need to talk." I almost said no, but something told me I had to go. When I got there, he was waiting by the entrance, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen him. "I keep seeing it," he whispered. "That face, in my dreams in the windows. I think it followed us." We sat in silence for a while, both of us too scared to say what we were really thinking. Finally, I told him everything, about the door, the face, the mannequin. He nodded like he already knew. "I don't think it wants us," he said quietly. "I think it wants to be seen." That night, I dreamed I was back in the science wing. The door was open, and the mannequin was waiting for me, its head slowly turning to face me as I walked closer. When I reached out to touch it, its eyes snapped open, and I woke up screaming. Graduation came and went. I got my diploma, took the usual photos, and tried to put it all behind me. But even now, years later, I still feel uneasy whenever I walk past the locked door or see my reflection in a dark window. Sometimes I hear that scraping sound, faint but unmistakable, and I wonder if the thing in Lab 3B is still waiting, for me or for someone else. People love to tell ghost stories about haunted schools, but most of them are just made up. I wish I could say mine was too, but I know what I saw. And I know that some doors, once closed, should never be opened again. You know how people say a picture is worth 1,000 words? I used to think that was just something teachers said to fill up time in art class. But after what happened to me on the last day of 8th grade, I know some pictures are worth 1,000 nightmares. The last day of school was always a big deal at my middle school. The gym was packed with students, the air thick with the smell of sweat, floor polish, and cheap pizza. Everyone was running around, signing yearbooks, taking selfies, and saying goodbye to teachers they'd spent the last 3 years with. I was mostly trying to avoid the yearbook photographer, Mr. Dorsey, a cranky old guy with thick glasses, a brown cardigan, and a permanent scowl. He'd been taking our pictures since elementary school, and every year he looked a little more tired, a little more faded, like an old photograph left out in the sun. My mom had insisted I wear a blue button-up shirt for the photo. She even combed my hair before I left for school, which was embarrassing, but I let her do it. "You'll want to remember this day," she said, snapping a picture of me on our porch. I rolled my eyes, but I smiled for her. I figured I'd just get the yearbook photo over with and get back to my friends. When my name was called, I trudged over to the corner of the gym where Mr. Dorsey had set up his little photo booth. It was just a folding chair in front of a wrinkled blue backdrop, with his ancient camera perched on a tripod. He barely looked at me as he fiddled with the settings, muttering about the lighting. "Sit up straight," he said, his voice gravelly, and a smile. I sat on the chair, trying not to fidget. Mr. Dorsey kept glancing over my shoulder, his hands shaking as he adjusted the lens. For a second, I thought I saw something like fear in his eyes. He snapped the picture, the flash blinding me for a moment. I stood up, ready to leave, but he reached out and gently grabbed my arm. "Take care, kid," he said, his voice trembling. Some things don't belong to pictures." I thought he was just being weird, so I shrugged it off and went back to my friends. We spent the rest of the day goofing off, eating cupcakes, and talking about summer plans. By the time I got home, I had forgotten all about the photo. That night, my mom got an email from the school with a link to the digital proofs. She called me over to the computer, eager to see how my picture turned out. I clicked through the photos, cringing at my awkward smile. But then I noticed something strange. In my photo, just behind my left shoulder, there was a shadowy blur. At first, I thought it was just a smudge on the lens, but when I zoomed in, I saw it clearly. A face, pale, with hollow eyes and a twisted grin. It looked like it was leaning in from behind me, its mouth open in a silent scream. My mom said it was probably just a trick of the light, maybe a reflection off the gym wall. But the more I looked at it, the more real it seemed. I showed it to my best friend, Lily, the next day. She stared at the screen for a long time, her face pale. That's not normal," she whispered. "Did you see anyone behind you?" I shook my head. "No one. Just Mr. Dorsey and his camera." We tried to laugh it off, but I could tell it bothered her. It bothered me, too. That night, I had trouble sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that face, those empty eyes, that twisted grin. It felt like it was watching me, waiting for me to fall asleep. The next morning, the school sent out another email. Mr. Dorsey had died in his sleep the night before. Heart attack, they said. He'd been found with his camera in his lap, the last photo he'd taken still displayed on the screen. My photo. I didn't know what to think. Part of me wanted to believe it was just a coincidence, but another part of me wondered if it was something more. I started noticing weird things in other photos, too. In group shots with my friends, there would sometimes be a blurry shape in the background, or a pale face peeking out from behind someone's shoulder. I tried to ignore it, but it got harder and harder. A week later, I was flipping through my yearbook when I saw it again. In the class photo, there was that same face, hovering just behind me, almost hidden by the crowd. No one else seemed to notice, but I couldn't look away. It was clearer this time, more defined. The eyes were darker, the grin wider. I started having nightmares. In them, I was trapped in the school gym, alone except for that face. Always just out of reach, always watching. Sometimes it would whisper my name, the sound echoing off the walls. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart racing. One night I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing. It was a text from an unknown number. The message was just a photo, my yearbook picture, but the face was right next to mine now, its mouth open wider, as if it was about to swallow me whole. I showed my mom, but she just said I was letting my imagination run wild. It's just a prank, honey. Someone's messing with you. But I knew it wasn't a prank. The fear in Mr. Dorsey's eyes, the way he'd warned me. Some things don't belong in pictures. I started avoiding cameras altogether. I stopped taking selfies, stopped letting my friends tag me in photos. I even covered up the mirrors in my room, just in case. But it didn't help. The face started appearing in other places, in the reflections of windows, in the glass of the TV when it was turned off. Always watching, always grinning. The worst part was, no one else could see it. I tried showing Lily, but she just saw a blurry smudge. My parents thought I was going through a phase, maybe stressed about starting high school. But I knew the truth. The face was real, and it was getting closer. On the night before high school started, I had the worst nightmare yet. I was back in the gym, sitting in the photo booth. Mr. Dorsey was there, but his eyes were empty, his face twisted into the same grin as the thing in the photo. He lifted his camera, pointed it at me, and whispered, "Smile." The flash went off, and when my vision cleared, the face was right in front of me, its mouth open wide enough to swallow me whole. I screamed and woke up, gasping for breath. The next morning, I found my yearbook on my desk, open to my photo. Someone had drawn a black circle around the face, and underneath, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "You're next." I tried to tell myself it was just a bad dream, just a coincidence. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I knew that whatever was in that photo was still out there, still watching me, waiting for the right moment. I never picked up my yearbook again. I avoided cameras, avoided mirrors, avoided anything that might capture my reflection. But sometimes, late at night, I see that face in the darkness, grinning at me from the shadows. And I know that no matter how far I run, I'll never be able to escape it. Some things don't belong in pictures. Some things should be left in the dark. Everyone always says the last day of school is the best day of the year. You can feel summer in the air, the promise of freedom just around the corner. Teachers are too tired to care. Students are too excited to sit still. And the only thing standing between you and months of sleeping in is that final bell. I used to love that feeling. The anticipation, the countdown. The way the whole building seemed to buzz with energy. But after what happened to me in 8th grade, the sound of a school bell makes my skin crawl. It started out like any other last day. My friends and I were counting down the minutes, scribbling in each other's yearbooks, tossing paper airplanes when the teacher wasn't looking. Our homeroom teacher, Miss Harper, was usually strict, but even she had loosened up. She let us eat snacks and play music on someone's phone. The clock on the wall seemed to move slower than ever, but we all knew that soon the final bell would ring and we'd be free. But that day, the bell never rang. It was weird because our school was like clockwork. The bells always rang on time. Start of class, end of class, lunch, dismissal. But as the hands of the clock ticked past 3 o'clock, then 3:05, then 3:10, nothing happened. At first we joked about it. Maybe the principal had forgotten. Maybe the power was out. But the lights were still on and we could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. Miss Harper looked at the clock, then at her phone. "That's strange," she said, frowning. Let me go check with the office. Everyone stay here, okay? We all nodded, barely listening. As soon as she left, the room erupted into nervous chatter. I started texting my mom, but my phone wouldn't send. No signal. I tried to open Instagram, but nothing loaded. Around the room, other kids were having the same problem. Maybe the Wi-Fi's down, my friend Marcus said, but his voice sounded shaky. We waited for Miss Harper to come back. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The hallway outside was weirdly quiet. No sounds of lockers slamming, no teachers calling out goodbyes, no footsteps echoing on the linoleum. Just silence. I got up and peeked out the door. The hallway lights were flickering, casting long, jittery shadows on the walls. I called out for Miss Harper, but my voice sounded small, swallowed up by the emptiness. I thought about going after her, but something about the silence made my skin prickle. Back in the classroom, my friends were starting to get scared. What if something happened to her? Whispered Jenny, hugging her backpack to her chest. She probably just got caught up talking to another teacher, I said, trying to sound calm. But I didn't believe it. The room started to feel colder, like the air conditioning had been cranked up. I looked out the window and felt my stomach drop. It was pitch black outside. Not just cloudy or overcast, completely, utterly black, like someone had painted over the windows. I checked the clock again. 3:27 p.m. It should have been broad daylight. Guys, come look at this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Everyone crowded around the window. Someone tried to open it, but it was stuck. We banged on the glass, but the darkness outside just seemed to press in closer, like a thick fog. That's when we heard the scratching. It started as a faint, rhythmic sound, like fingernails on wood. At first I thought it was coming from the hallway, but then I realized it was coming from the classroom door. We all froze, staring at the door as the scratching grew louder, more insistent. Maybe it's Miss Harper, Marcus whispered. But I knew it wasn't. The sound was too deliberate, too hungry. Jenny started to cry. I want to go home, she sobbed. I wanted to comfort her, but I was too scared. I felt like a rabbit caught in a trap, heart pounding, unable to move. The scratching stopped. For a moment there was silence. Then slowly, the door creaked open. No one was there. We stared into the empty hallway, too scared to move. The lights outside flickered and died, plunging the corridor into darkness. I could just make out a trail of wet, muddy footprints leading away from the door, down the hall, toward the basement stairs. One by one, my classmates started to disappear. It happened slowly at first. Marcus was the first to go. He said he was going to look for Miss Harper, to see if she was in the office. We all told him not to go, but he just shook his head and slipped out the door. We heard his footsteps fade away, then nothing. Next was Jenny. She couldn't stop crying. She said she just wanted to go home, that her mom would be worried. She grabbed her backpack and ran out into the hallway before anyone could stop her. I wanted to go after them, but something told me not to leave the classroom. I felt like if I stepped into that hallway, I'd be lost forever. The room grew colder. The lights flickered and buzzed. I could hear faint voices echoing from the basement. Marcus and Jenny calling for help, their voices twisted and distorted. I covered my ears, but the voices just got louder. There were only 3 of us left. Me, Sarah, and Brian. We huddled together in the corner, too scared to move. The darkness outside pressed against the windows, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to move on their own. Then Sarah stood up. I can't stay here, she whispered. I have to find them. Before I could stop her, she was gone. The door swung shut behind her, and the scratching started again, louder this time, more desperate. Brian and I sat in silence, listening to the scratching, the voices, the distant sound of footsteps in the hallway. I don't know how long we sat there. Time seemed to stretch and warp, the minutes bleeding into hours. Eventually, Brian couldn't take it anymore. He stood up, his face pale and drawn. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I have to try." He slipped out the door, and I was alone. I pressed myself against the window, desperate for any sign of life. In the darkness below, I saw them. My friends, standing in a circle in the courtyard, heads bowed, as something moved among them. Something not human. It was tall and thin, with long arms and a face that seemed to shift and blur every time I tried to focus on it. It moved from person to person, touching each of them on the shoulder. Every time it touched someone, they shuddered and went still. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything but watch. But I couldn't move. I was frozen, trapped in the classroom, my heart pounding in my chest. The scratching at the door grew louder, more frantic. I backed away, pressing myself against the far wall. The door rattled on its hinges, the sound echoing through the empty hallways. Then suddenly everything stopped. The scratching, the voices, the flickering lights, all gone. The room was silent. The darkness outside gone, replaced by the soft gray light of morning. The door swung open, and the police rushed in. They found me huddled in the corner, shaking and sobbing. They asked me what happened, where everyone else had gone. I tried to tell them, but the words wouldn't come out. No one else was ever found. They searched the school from top to bottom, every classroom, every hallway, every inch of the basement. But my classmates were gone, vanished without a trace. The only evidence that anything had happened was the trail of muddy footprints leading to the basement, and the deep scratches gouged into the wood of our classroom door. I spent the rest of the summer in a daze, haunted by nightmares of the thing in the courtyard, the scratching at the door, the faces of my friends as they disappeared one by one. When school started again in the fall, I couldn't bring myself to go back. My parents transferred me to a different district, and I never saw that building again. But sometimes, late at night, I hear the sound of a bell ringing in the distance. The final bell, echoing through empty hallways, calling me back. And I know that whatever happened on that last day of school isn't over. Not for me, not for any of us. Because some doors, once open, can never be closed again.